Likely that by the end of 2020, we'll have some clinical data on certain vaccine candidates from a safety perspective, and also to tell us whether the vaccine shows signs of being protective. But I am optimistic. I do think that we are able to develop an effective and safe vaccine, and that it will be available in the doses which we need. And when it is available, we need to ensure that it's accessible to everyone around the world. We don't yet have a vaccine for Covid-19, but what we need to remember is that Covid-19 was only identified at the end of December 2019, so essentially it's less than 5 months old. And normally it takes more than 10 years to develop a vaccine. It's likely that by the end of 2020, we'll have some clinical data on certain vaccine candidates from a safety perspective, and also to tell us whether the vaccine shows signs of being protective. There are multiple challenges to developing an effective vaccine, which is why it normally takes more than 10 years to develop one. Firstly, the speed at which we want a vaccine to be developed and available to everyone. And secondly, the scale, the number of doses that we want available. We want doses available for everyone in the world, ideally, and this is in the billions. There's no guarantee that we'll be able to develop an effective vaccine against COVID-19. This isn't a given. So what a 2 billion funding gap means is that with the multiple candidates which are currently in early stage development, it might mean that some promising candidates may not be able to be taken forward. In essence, we have fewer shots on goal and less opportunities, less chances to develop an effective vaccine. It could also take much longer. But I am optimistic. I do think that we are able to develop an effective and safe vaccine, and that it will be available in the doses which we need. And when it is available, we need to ensure that it's accessible to everyone around the world. Because as long as one country still has COVID, we're all at risk.
Well, there are 4 phases in terms of clinical development of a vaccine. The first phase is actually when you first put a vaccine into volunteers for the first time. That's called phase 1, and it's usually in small numbers, tens of volunteers. And there you're looking at predominantly the safety of the vaccine. Is it safe? How well is it tolerated? What are the side effects? The second phase is then to move into a few hundred individuals and continue to look at safety and say, what kind of immune response does the vaccine induce? If that goes well and it still looks safe, then you move into phase 3, which is looking at how well the vaccine protects against natural infection. If that's successful and you show that the vaccine works really well and still continues to be safe, then you may be able to get a license for that vaccine and start to roll it out in the wider community. But that's the 4th phase, where you still need to track safety for a prolonged period of time, several years. We think that those first vaccines probably may well be more effective against disease, preventing people becoming sick, than blocking transmission. Ideally, we want a vaccine that's 90% effective. The first vaccines may not get there, so we don't know what threshold is required to make a vaccine worthwhile moving out as a public health policy. Making a vaccine for 7 billion people has never been done before. I think the logistics of getting a vaccine out to those people that need it is a significant undertaking. It's not going to happen in days, weeks, months. It's more likely to happen over a year or even several years. And there may well be a requirement for booster vaccinations, even on an annual basis. So this is something where it's going to be a long haul to make sure that everybody's protected against COVID-19 for the foreseeable future.
We have a global problem that requires a global solution. We need the best science in the world. We need the best manufacturing in the world. If we have anybody left over anywhere as a reservoir of virus, it not only threatens them, but threatens the world. this is costing us $2 to $4 trillion for this outbreak right now. So even if we can move forward vaccines by 1 or 2 weeks, it may pay for itself.
The collaboration is unprecedented. Normally, we have paper processes which take weeks and months to get feedback. Today, we talk about getting feedback from regulators within the day. The collaborations are really very, very intense. Even over the weekend, we are having meetings with regulators around the world at the moment. So it's really exceptionally special as you go through it, and you see the commitment of everybody involved.
Our goal is ideally in the summer to start very large clinical trial, phase 3 or pivotal studies. And you're talking, thousands of people, maybe, up to 10,000 people across many different hospitals around the world. And the goal will be to be in a position to potentially, assuming everything goes well, to go to the regulators and to actually ask for product approval as early as the end of this year. They will have then to review the file, which will lead to potential approval in the first quarter of the first half of 2021. That's for approval that it can be used for millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people.
Where we will take over is in the manufacturing side, and then ultimately, obviously, scale up in distribution. And that has to be done in partnership with industry. So the challenge for this is industry, of course, can invest in making sure there's manufacturing, but they need to know that somebody's going to buy it. And that's what we're trying to create now as an advanced market commitment with push and pull.
What's going to be important here, and what's very unique, is that we have to go so fast and so huge. Because where Ebola was a problem in Central Africa, with a few 100,000 vaccines, you can get it under control. Here you need billions of vaccines. And that's where industry comes in, I think, is that you need a large contingent of people with a lot of experience to develop vaccines fast and globally. And then you need, in parallel, not just sequential, but you need to start already preparing manufacturing long before you have your clinical results available. It's absolutely the challenge of getting to enough vials, filling capacity, but also drug substance, vaccine itself production. It's unprecedented that probably several vaccines are going to be made in a billion type of quantity. We count today on doing 5 vaccines per vial, because there is no other way to get 1 billion vaccines to people in 18 months if you don't start working like that.
Ebola was an opportunity to come together and experiment with this, but not at the scale we're talking about. And this is why the private sector is critical. Paul talked about the private sector for vaccines, but let me talk about a different role for the private sector, which is going to be in distribution, bringing innovation in. How do we do last mile? We're working with UPS on that. We're working with drones to deliver equipment.
We try to make sure that there is a very large capacity available so that the quantity can support a large part of the world, and fighting for equitable access in the world, that people can get access wherever they need it in the world is very important. If we don't solve this infection in every part of the world, it will not be solved for the world. And that's where an unprecedented global collaboration will be needed. And speed. Days count, hours count, not just for the economy, but just for every life which will be lost if we do this not fast.